Hi everyone, Dan Bensonoff here in the Franklin Permaculture Garden on a beautiful late June day. We're in early summer, got a lot of growth going on, and today I want to talk about how we use plants to cycle fertility in our garden. Specifically, I want to show you how we make Comfrey Tea, which is one of the many plant teas that we make and that we feed as opposed to using conventional or even organic fertilizers. So I'm standing in front of some comfrey plants here. Comfrey is also known by symphytum, that's the Latin name. It's a really lovely herbaceous perennial plant, which means that it'll die back to the ground after some frost and it'll come back up every single year. So really easy, low maintenance plant. It's a must-have, I would say, in just about any garden. Extremely versatile, so many uses. And today I really want to focus on this use of how it can take fertility from deep in the ground and bring it up to the surface where we can use it. So I just want to point out, actually, before I go further, that this comfrey, this is called Bocking 14. And the reason I want to point that out is because some comfreys set seed and become very weedy. Bocking 14 is a sterile hybrid comfrey, so it will never form seed, it will never spread from where you put it. But once you put it somewhere, it will be there for just about ever. It's extremely easy to propagate from root cutting, so if we do want it in a new location, we dig up the root, we chop it into pieces, we plant it somewhere else. But we just recognize that once it's there, it's going to be there for a long time. So I'm going to make some comfrey tea, and then I'll tell you a little bit about how we're going to use it. So the first thing I'm going to do is just cut this entire plant right down to the ground. And I know that might feel a little extreme, but this plant will actually regrow 3, 4, even 5 times in a single season if you just cut it right down to that. So think of it as a way of producing fertilizer just by growing it right in place. So once I have some of this harvested, I can just stuff it into a bucket. I like to cut it up a little bit just to make it a little more accessible, but you can also just stuff it in there. I'm gonna cut the rest of this as well. And this is, you can really cut this plant anytime, but I generally prefer to cut it after it's done most of its flowering. You can see the flowers right there, kind of small purple flowers, really attractive to bumblebees, by the way. But once they've mostly done flowering, at that point, it's no longer of much use to pollinators and still has a lot of nutrition in it. So I'm just gonna go ahead and stuff those in. Again, I'm not being too careful about where I cut it. I could have cut it earlier, could cut it later, whenever you can. It's really flexible. All right, so it's a very easy plant to work with. Cut a little bit more. I just want to really fill this bucket up all the way to the top to make a really nice, strong tea. All right, maybe a few more stems should do. Great. And I know that looks pretty bare, but again, it's going to regrow so fast. Great, so now that it's full, the next step would just be adding some water to cover the entire thing. And usually what I do at that point is I'll use a stone or two or a brick just to weigh everything down. So imagine this filled up. This is going to sit in this bucket for about 2-3 weeks. And really what's happening during that time is that it is fermenting. So it's breaking down. All of the nutrition from the comfrey is coming into the water. And I should warn you, it gets smelly. It's not really a problem when it's closed, but when you open it up, whew, it does smell, but totally worth it to go through that smell for a little bit because it does wonders for plants. So I have some that's finished here. It's been sitting for, I don't know, maybe about 2 weeks. This one could have probably used a little bit more time. You could see it's kind of sludgy, doesn't look very nice, but it is powerful stuff. So the next step that I do once it's been sitting, I'll pour it through a sieve to get the plant material out so that we can use the tea. Oh, there it goes. And there are some rocks in there. Great, so I'll take those rocks out, save them for the next batch. And then, filter that out. And what's left over is excellent fertilizer. And what we do is we use about 1 part Comfrey Tea to about 10 parts water, and we'll put it into a watering can and deliver it to the plants. Now, each plant has its own unique nutritional profile. It's important to know about that when you're thinking about where you want to deliver this nutrition to. So Comfrey, really rich in potassium, calcium, has a little bit of nitrogen in it. I think of it as a plant that supports root and fruit development. That's that potassium in there. So it's important to think about that. So I'm thinking about giving this to something that I really want to create a really robust root system, or to a plant that's in its flowering or early fruiting stages to really give it a nice boost. So I might give this to some of our garlic perhaps, which is really starting to bulb out. I might give it to some of our tomatoes, which are starting to fruit as well. So that's where I'm thinking about it. We also make a very similar tea using nettle quite frequently in our garden. Nettle is another very common weed. A lot of people grow it in their gardens as well. Nettle is one that's really high in nitrogen. That's one I would use for plants that really need a lot of green vegetative growth. So ones that you really want to give a boost so that they grow nice and big and strong. That's where we deliver our nettle to. So it's nice to know a little bit about. You can do this with quite a few teas, different herbs. This is a method that really comes from biodynamic gardening and farming. It's a really, really useful method. And again, it just makes you really more self-sufficient in the garden, makes you really able to move fertility around in a really robust way to support the entire system. So good luck and give it a try.